Recording in progress.
Everyone. Yep. Okay. Thanks everybody for joining us. Um, we are here today to talk about the exorbitant amount of taxpayer dollars that are being spent on political ads against Amendment 3. I am going to start by having John Morgan make some remarks, and then we'll go to Senator Pizzo and Senator Gruters. And then we'll have a little bit of time at the end for QA. So you'll just be able to raise your hand, and we'll call on you. So thanks again for being here, and I will hand it over to John Morgan.
Well, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. Let me apologize for where I'm coming to you from, which is the front seat of my car. My dog is sick, and I'm at the vet picking up medicine. So I apologize for the glare or whatever you may see. But, in Florida, I know a little bit about constitutional amendments. I've done 3 in my life. I did the medical marijuana that failed. I did the medical marijuana that passed. And then I did the amendment that raised the minimum wage. There's been other constitutional amendments the same way: fair districts, felons' rights. A lot of people are always saying, well, why don't we do this in the legislature? Well, because the legislature won't allow it. They don't want it, which will be indicated later in this and why. So to do a constitutional amendment, you have to take a very narrow path, which is called single subject. It can only be one subject. A lot of people are mad that the amendment doesn't call for home grow. We want home grow, but if you put home grow in there, the single subject is violated. If they want home grow, they can put it in the legislature. So that's the deal. But what I have found in every amendment is that the powers that be don't want to give the power to the people. They want to keep the power to themselves. What I've also found that's very heartening to me is that when you take the D and R away from an issue, most of us agree on most things. Medical marijuana passed with over 70% of the vote. People told me I was crazy about minimum wage, but you take the D and R away, and we, the people, can do great things. Every time this has been successful, Tallahassee has tried to make it more difficult. When I put my amendments on the ballot, it cost about this much money. Now it costs about this much money. Why? The powers in Tallahassee don't want the people to have the power. So it's gotten harder and harder and harder and harder to do. But it's worth it because you're worth it. We're worth it. And at the essence of democracy, the people do have the power. What troubles me today and what brings us here today is that the desire to keep that power in Tallahassee, that the opponents of Amendment 3 are now using taxpayer money that was supposed to be designated for opioid rehabilitation, study. That taxpayer money, your money, my money, our money, is being used to combat Amendment 3. Look, if private individuals and private companies want to say no to this, absolutely, I understand that. But when our government is so locked into keeping power, and power corrupts, that's a new level. And now we've reached a whole new level where we're taking, robbing, stealing taxpayer money that's designated for opioids to stopping Amendment 3, the legalization of marijuana, recreational marijuana. And here's the ultimate irony of it all. Guess what the greatest combatant of opioids is in the world? And by the way, I know a lot about opioids because my law firm has represented many states, many cities, and I'm on the big MDL in Cleveland. The opioid industry is a corrupt industry. More deaths under 50 by opioids than anything else. But you know what the greatest solution to opioids is? Marijuana. So we're using opioid money to fight Amendment 3. It's perverse. It's wrong. Some people say it's stealing, but it's power being abused at its worst. So I felt compelled to come here today with two senators on two different sides of the aisles. As we've gone through all this, we found a lot of things. President Trump supports Amendment 3. We applaud him. Many other people support Amendment 3. But today, we, the taxpayers, have to say, this is wrong. This shouldn't be going on. Take your hands off our money. And then I don't want to monopolize the time. I'd like to give it to the two senators to give their 2 cents.
Thanks, John. Just picking up off on that, I come from a slightly more, and a lot of the press that are on here are familiar with just, who I am and what I am and how I am. And it's really about the plain reading of the law, both the spirit, the intent, and why we have laws in the first place, and really why we have separation of powers and 3 branches of government. Senator Gruters and I both elected November of 2018, and I think he would join me in understanding and appreciating that 3 branches almost seem to sort of conflate into one and losing autonomy. The taxpayer dollars of Florida that are generated, that form our revenue, those dollars are to be gatekept and protected and preserved and allocated through appropriations. That is the exclusive purview of the legislature. Governor certainly has the power to veto and does every year, but where the original and the genesis of the intention and the direction of those dollars are to go comes from a very deliberate process in the legislature that we vet, and we do so as our fiduciary obligation to taxpayers, as our only single constitutional duty as members of the Florida legislature is actually to pass a budget. Every other bill is ancillary and not part of that duty. And very specifically, as it relates to the use of state agencies to promulgate or disseminate information in an overtly and objectively influencing manner, was not directed or authorized by the legislature. So when the Departments of Health and Children and Family Services or Education and Transportation, they have misappropriated funds. They have taken funds that were either marked for something else or directed for something else, but more specifically and more dangerously not intended to violate the law and go ahead and pick one particular position or on a subject matter issue on the ballot that should be completely ecumenical treatment that people should be able to research and decide for themselves. These individuals and actors involved have never been, for the last 6 years that I've been in office, the governor's been in office or his staff, and these agency heads that have come in and come out have never been short on resources. We operate in a fiscally sound manner, and there's never been a dearth of resources to be able to convey a message, and certainly no lack of opportunity to do so. As many of you know, I went ahead and actually filed suit for an injunction against the conduct. I wasn't seeking to criminalize anyone or anything, or use the courts to penalize anyone. We just wanted the conduct to stop. It's one thing if I walk into Publix and I say, "Hey, I'm Jason." It's a different if I walk up to the manager and say, "Hi, I'm State Senator Jason Pizzo." So when you do so under the color of authority with the badges and insignia and logos, and it purports to give a very serious tone to it, and people, I generally think, as I would presume, that when myself or my kids are reading something from an official state agency website, that it's dispassionate of any political position, and that it's just giving statistics and giving numbers and not really a secondary ad campaign for one person's whims or wishes. So Again, there is no appropriation specifically even for FDOT to go ahead and spend money on this. And I'm sure we can take in questions and answers the period and pattern over the last decade or so, even with medical marijuana introduction, with PSAs about drinking and driving and DUI. But I will tell you, as a former prosecutor, I'm well aware of each and every single crime and the most often used 536 felonies that have been charged with thousands and thousands of cases in the 11th district here. And again, we're now seeing upwards of $50 million that we have data to support, $50 million being spent on this ad campaign. I mean, that's more than half of what we spent on Visit Florida to drive tourism as our largest economic driver for the state. And this is all for the ideology and position of just a few people. So I'm going to hand it over to Senator Gruters and invite any questions at the end.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Pizzo, and so a lot of great points there. And thank you, Mr. Morgan. A lot of great points from you too. And one interesting thing about this Zoom call today is, yeah, we are on different political sides, but it shows you that this issue shows no real political boundaries. This is supported by great conservatives like President Donald J. Trump, myself, the conservative sheriff Gordon Smith, the Libertarian Party, the Democrat Party, and lots of others. This is a bipartisan issue, and I think I think at the end of the day, we'll be able to regulate this in a way where we can do this the Florida way, we can do this the right way, and we're going to make this a big win for Florida. But no matter where you stand on an issue, this is still a democracy, and in a democracy, we do not spend taxpayer dollars in advance of a political issue. Tax dollars are meant to be spent on our police, schools, roads, and other public programs that make our state great, not political agendas. I'm for Amendment 3, as everybody knows, but I've been an outspoken critic against Amendment 4. But no matter what the issue or where I stand, I fully believe that this is undemocratic and a violation of Florida law to spend taxpayer funds on political ads, period. If you remember in 2022, a lot of you reported on the fact that we voted to prevent local governments from spending taxpayer dollars in support or opposition of any type of issue campaigns. This law passed because it's the right thing to do. Myself and my Republican colleagues champion that legislation because we value our individual freedoms and do not want anyone or any institution to be misused for political reasons. That should also be true for our state agencies. Under no circumstance should the state government be able to decide without input from the legislature that $50 million owed to the taxpayers will be spent on a political agenda. Yesterday, I saw a report that $4 million was allocated for opioid use reduction programs, may have been used instead on political ads. If this is true, these agencies owe an explanation to the people of the state, and especially those who may be struggling and need help. The state is spending money on political ads, TV, radio, digital billboards in excess of $50 million. 13,000 different TV ads have aired already, 5,000 radio ads, billboards, digital. And my point is like I said at the beginning, we still live in a democracy, no matter where you stand on these issues. We shouldn't be spending money on propaganda one way or the other, because what it does is it sets a bad precedent for future administrations. That's why I joined my friends on this call, and I'm happy to take any questions as well.
Give me just a second, folks. I am looking to see whose hands are up. Okay, Romy, I'm gonna go to you first.
Hi, this is Romy with the Tampa Bay Times. I wanted to talk about the opioid settlement trust fund dollars specifically. The statewide council that oversees it does include Secretary Siobhan Harris, includes Ashley Moody. I mean, how can you ensure that there's accountability for how these dollars are spent if they were spent on these ads?
Well, certainly we should require transparency from all the state agencies, and they should show us exactly, we're getting some of our numbers based on professionals that are in the business that are counting these ads, adding it all up, and that's what they're coming up with. But I fully agree. How do you get full transparency? They should show us their records of what they're spending right now, and certainly if they don't agree with that. I think the legislature can come back in session and demand a full accountability report, either through some type of audit or some other way.
Romy, if I'm just to tack onto that, if you go on Transparency Florida, for instance, just by way of proportion here, the entire line item I think we had appropriated is $2.4 million. 1.6 million, maybe 1,640,000 of that was for advertising for proposed constitutional amendments, right? So actually, the subject of what we're talking about, $1.6 million to the Department of to the State Department of Elections. Only $16,000 of that, with a week and a half away out from this general election on November 5th, has been dispersed. But it's pretty easy to track and see media buys for any of these agencies, well in excess, in the tens of millions. So just to give you an idea, they haven't even used the amount of money that's been appropriated to them to go and actually advertise constitutional amendments, but spend tens of millions of dollars telling you how to vote.
All right. I am going to go to Lawrence.
Hey, thanks, guys. My question is for Senator Gruters. There's a state statute that makes this a misdemeanor for state agencies to be basically electioneering. Do you think the state is violating that statute?
Well, certainly we need full transparency. And listen, I think spending any taxpayer dollars on any type of propaganda is wrong. Like I said, I'm fully against Amendment 4, some of the ads that they're spending money on, but I do not think that tax dollars should be going to pay to influence the public. I think that's not what it's intended for. And certainly, I'll let Senator Pizzo talk about the legality, but certainly I think they're going down the wrong path, and it's bad for Florida.
Lawrence, yeah, if you'll indulge me, I think the plain reading of 104.31 that this is a misdemeanor. Now, the slight nuance in this is, y'all remember National Lampoon's Vacation, when the station wagon is all busted up and the mechanic is basically price gouging the Griswolds, and Clark has to pay it, and he goes, "I wonder what your sheriff would think of your business practices." And the mechanic opens his wallet, and he is the sheriff. You have a rather, within the four corners of our government, you have a conflated branch, all branches. And so, when you go back to the 2018 election, Lawrence, you'll remember that the governor and Attorney General Moody were both against Amendment 4. And this is a question that Chris Roberts actually posed here in the chat, and it's spot on, which is you're all not forgetting, certainly not you, but the public. It's disingenuous not to inform the public that even if this passes, remember the Amendment 4 in 2018 on returning citizens to vote passed with 5,148,926 votes. The top vote getter for the gubernatorial got 4,076,000. But what happened after even they campaigned against Amendment 4? There was an implementing bill that was carried by Senator Brandis. And so there's going to be all kinds of guardrails and restrictions. Senator Gruters, my colleague here, is the guy who passed the bill that you can't smoke on the beach anymore. So I don't think he's going to be, all about, fire up a blunt on the beach. So there's an implementing bill that follows. There'll be a lot of consternation from people who will complain about how narrow and how many guardrails are put in place thereafter, after a popular vote. I'll leave it at that.
All right, I'm going to go to Evan.
Hey folks, how are you? I have a couple of quick questions. One is, do you folks see this as a test of the governor's political strength?
So I'll take it quick. Maybe Joe or John wants to take this. I'm a little nerdy when it comes to the law. Maybe it's because I was a former prosecutor, and you have to shoot straight and you can't speculate, and you have to use case law and real life and tell the truth. Otherwise, you suffer an incredible professional and reputational consequence. There's the reality is I don't. This is not governor specific. This is not person specific. This is about the plain use of the law. I had a problem I think a lot of my Republican colleagues didn't care, but I had a fundamental intellectual problem with the fact that money we did not appropriate through a deliberative process in the budget a year and a half ago was used to fly migrants from San Antonio to Martha's Vineyard. I think that $12 million would have been better spent, on something else. Be that as it may, whatever your political position is, I think the border is absolutely in crisis, and I'm a Democrat. But still, intellectually, as it relates to the Constitution, the operation and function of branches of government, that money was not vetted on the subject, and it was on the back of the bill. And so we went up for special session for another issue, and while we were there, we had to repeal it and file another one. And then my Republican colleagues in the majority went ahead and made a deliberate decision to go ahead and fund $10 million to a different state agency for immigration purposes. And while I was on the opposite side, I think of Senator Gruters, who had SB 168 our first year, I didn't really fight it that much because you were following proper procedure and protocol. I think the governor needs a job after his term is over, and there are a lot of really wealthy people who have plenty of money who can put money into things in their position. Mr. Morgan is a wealthy individual, a very successful individual who puts his money where his mouth is and advocates for positions to give people a living wage, to allow those that are suffering to have medical marijuana in the past. And then there are those who are in opposition, who are far wealthier than Mr. Morgan. And I think the governor is interviewing for a job probably after his term's up.
I personally think the governor's been doing a great job with the state of Florida on a lot of different policies, but just like the conservative Sheriff Gordon Smith says, he personally says he thinks Ron DeSantis is the best governor Florida's ever had. And although he thinks that, he thinks he's making a mistake on this one issue. So it's listen, we can agree and have differences of opinion, but don't forget, Donald Trump has come out in favor of this, along with many other political leaders. So.
Okay, I've got time for 2 more questions. Skylar, I'm going to go to you, and then Douglas, I'll go to you next.
Yeah, appreciate you letting me ask my question here. Hey, I just was hoping you all could maybe clarify on that $50 million figure. Are you saying that's $50 million in taxpayer-funded ads? And what are you basing that figure on? How did you arrive at that?
Morgan, can we provide to media the backup for those numbers to qualify?
Yeah, that's a number that our media folks have tracked down through a very complicated system of tracking the PSAs, and that's just specific to Amendment 3. But we'll make sure you guys have some backup for that. But Senator Gruters, I don't know if you have anything on that too.
No, listen, if we should require full transparency, if it's not 50 million, show us exactly what was spent with tax dollars. To me, that's an easy solution to refute it. But if it's the professionals who are saying it's $50 million, then we got to go with that unless they disclose exactly how much money, how much tax dollars have actually been spent on these ads.
All right, Douglas, last questions to you.
Thank you. Senator Pizzo, I know there's the advertisement you identified in your Leon County lawsuit, but what other advertisements stand out to you three that in your mind step over the line of legality?
Well, so it's timing and content, really. So it's a whole time, place, and manner kind of situation. Whether you're filing an ethics complaint, a criminal investigation complaint, or any number of things, it's the timing of it. So it's a bit of go slow, hurry up. I don't dispute that in the last decade, the last 7-8 years, that FDOT hasn't, or local sheriffs haven't done PSAs on particular topics. So it's really the timing leading up to it, number one. And of course, the one I enumerated seeking declaratory judgment and injunction is when you say states that have legalized marijuana, right? So you're basically saying, in comparison in relation to, as you have an upcoming election and have to make a decision in states that have legalized marijuana. The content, the spirit, and that nuance, it's not really, it's as subtle as a train wreck, is not found in any prior PSA anywhere. And you guys go back and do a little searching in history. Mr. Morgan can probably speak to this. This is sort of a second or third rodeo on this. No state dollars, regardless of what the governor's position at that time or who the governor was or the legislature, no state dollars, taxpayer dollars were spent either advocating or being adversarial to a position. they have their pulpit, they have the resources, they have plenty of money and resources to do stuff. But that sticks out to me. States that have legalized, because we have a pending question on the ballot as to legalization here in Florida. And it's also obviously the timing. It's inartful, and it's really just gluttonous to go ahead and do so a couple weeks before an election.
I would just say this in my closing. You all remember the movie when they said, at the end of the day, follow the money. And the money will take you to intent and desire and motive. In my opinion, this is all driven by donors to politicians who don't want the people to have a say. What donors? Donors who have a vested interest in the pharmaceutical industry and the alcohol industry. Marijuana, recreational and medical, is an existential threat to both of those industries. With all due respect to the two senators, money runs Tallahassee, and you have to follow those donors. Ken Griffin, who I really respect, from Daytona Beach, he's the American success story. And by the way, I don't blame him for this, but he's put $7 million of his own money. And by the way, that's the way it should be. And by the way, a couple of weeks ago, Ken Griffin upped his stake in Pfizer, where he has 12% of the stock. This is about money. This is not about you. Because if it was about you, then the government would not be trying to give us false information about, children, being injured by gummies. It's ridiculous. The argument is, we're going to smell the smoke. That's their best argument. We're going to smell the smoke. No, we're not, because Gruters and Pizzo are going to implement it just like they did with medical marijuana. The thing I hope from all this, that comes from all this, is that you, the Florida taxpayers, are so outraged by this theft of tax dollars that you say, by God, I'm going to go out and I'm going to vote. And when you go out, I urge you, vote yes on 3.
And I don't know, Joe, do you have anything you want to end with? I'll just tell Mr. Morgan that was All the President's Men the year I was born in 1976. Listen, we're all trying to raise money. A lot of us have elections. I'm the incoming Senate Minority Leader, so it's my job to raise money for the caucus as a whole. But it's as cliche as you think it is. I don't think Joe would disagree with John's statement about that Tallahassee is driven by money. It's very much so, except I think for the couple people that are on here and a number of our other colleagues that act in good faith. But yeah, a lot of on a leadership level, a lot of it's driven by money. Far more donations have been made by the marijuana industry and political contributions to Republicans who have yet to return any of those dollars than certainly the Democrats. So if they feel that strongly about it, then they should return it.
Listen, at the end of the day, tax dollars should not go to fund propaganda, bottom line. And yes, I hope the reason why people hate politics and politicians is because here you have two sides saying almost exactly the opposite thing after this bill. I think this amendment's going to pass. We will be able to regulate it. We will be able to put those guardrails on it. And I hope the press in a year from now comes back and holds whatever side's not telling the truth. It's like you see these ads for the civil liability stuff. That stuff is written in the medical marijuana text amendment. That's been there. And they're smoking on and on. It's they're blowing hot air to try to confuse voters. And that's why people hate politics and politicians. But listen, this amendment's going to pass. This is about safety first and foremost. And we can do the right thing here. And I appreciate everybody for joining today and participating. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. And Joe, I think you'd agree with me. This is actually going to save lives. I have two 18-year-old identical twin boys. I want them. If they're going to experiment, they're going to do what they're going to do. They're going to be kids. It's going to save lives instead of something being laced with fentanyl on the corner that they buy at 2 o'clock in the morning, something that's vacuum sealed, quality controlled, and lab tested. This is going to save people's lives.
Well,
And-
and Senator Pizzo, if you remember, I spent a couple of years trying to regulate kratom for the same thing.
Sure.
Unadulterated products. You have 850,000 people consuming marijuana through the medical dispensaries with a medical ID card. 2 million people getting products from through the illicit markets, which products could be laced with who knows what type of substances.
Absolutely.
Number one. Number two, when they buy it, they could be one of 16,000 people that gets prosecuted for minor possession of marijuana. Listen, this issue should have been taken care of a long time ago. I appreciate John Morgan. I appreciate you for bringing the medical marijuana law back in 2012, the amendment. And that was the right thing then. And this is the further move in the progression of doing what's right for Florida. Safety, number one. Number two, decriminalization, long overdue. And number three, making sure that we can control the time, place, and manner that people could do this. But at the end of the day, propaganda, taxpayer-funded ads is bad. So.
All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And thank you to John Morgan and the senators.